I don't know if those claps help or if you just think they're funny because I'm ridiculous, but there you go, Joe. You got a clap. This is going to be Angel's introduction. So here we go. Angel Wilson is an autism educator, infant toddler development specialist, and after 15 years in the autism field, she'd pretty much done it all from therapist to developmental specialist, supervisor, trainer, assessor, interventionist. She learned and saw a lot. What she noticed, though, were that the concerns coming from families and providers, a lot of people knew of autism, but didn't really know about autism. This was especially true in minority communities or providers with a large percentage of minority students or clients. She decided to answer that call. And as her business continues to grow, she hopes that you'll join her in advocating for autism awareness and acceptance across the board, regardless of color or culture. Her website is Spark Guidance, and that's SPARC guidance.com. And the podcast that she does is the Spark Out podcast. Lots of incredible classes that you can take online, totally affordable courses that can help you if you're on the spectrum, if your kids are on the spectrum, if you are just a friendly and an ally. It's all good and it's all there. Thanks for joining us.
I wanna try and take in all the highs, embrace them for more than a moment's time. I want you, please don't move when I push you away. I know I contradict myself some days, but will you ride the lows with me?
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I am your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Our goal is to help discussions about mental health be a regular part of your daily life, no different than discussions about physical health. Mental illness can be a topic of discussion under the umbrella of mental health, along with so many other topics. This show is the original program on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com. Our network of shows are played in over 180 countries and cover more topics under that umbrella than you can possibly imagine. We were talking about mental health long before it became cool and popular to talk about, and thank goodness it has become so popular. We have incredible guests, advocates, patients, experts, people. Thank you for tuning in and enjoy our intro music, a song named Lows, written by Aubrey Toon. You can find her music at www.aubreytoone.com.
That night when I started praying, I cried, will you ride the lows with me? Will you ride the lows with me? When I'm down, my vision gets blurry.
Angel, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, I want to just make sure that our listeners get an idea of how we connected. You were referred to me, was it by Stephanie Holmes or was it by
Dr. Jones?
Dr. Mary Jones? That's
Yes.
right. Okay, I thought so. Yes, who I love. I just got a text from her actually. And every time I get something from her, it's just imbued with warm and fuzzies. So I can't wait to see what she's asking of me. So how did you meet Dr. Mary?
She actually reached out to me on LinkedIn. I had done a couple of posts because it's Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, and we're kind of wrapping it up this week. And I put a couple of posts out just with different facts about autism. And she reached out to me and said, I really want to talk to you. I would love to have you on my podcast. And so I was like, oh, yeah, sure. I'm always down for being on podcast. And so we set up and had the initial meeting that you usually have before you do an actual recording. And I kind of explained that my podcast was kind of homeless at the moment because of, things that I'm not going to go into details, but things that happened. And so it was kind of homeless. And she said, oh, I need to connect you to Kristin because, you could definitely fit in like right in the network that I'm in. And I was like, oh, okay, that would be great. And then she sent out an email and put us in connection to each other, and the rest was history.
And here we are. Yep. So
Yep.
tell everybody, what's the name of your show?
The show is called Spark Out, and it's kind of the second iteration of the first podcast I had, which was called Spark Up. So you can actually still go and find Spark Up, but from this point forward, any updates and new episodes are going to be coming in on Spark Out.
Yeah, and what's really cool, listeners, is we just pulled all her original content onto this new platform. So you can go to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts and look up Spark Out, and you'll have not only the new content that she's creating, but all the past shows, which are very recent. So I mean, definitely nothing's outdated. So tell me and tell us about your organization and what you do.
Sure. So my business is called Spark Guidance, and it's had a couple of different versions of itself over the years, but the where I finally kind of rested was that I noticed that most of my background and most of my experience was working basically on what I consider to be the front lines when it comes to autism services. I was a developmental specialist, I was a behavioral tech, I was a supervisor for a behavioral interventionist, all these different things. And one thing that kept coming up while I was working with the families over and over again was that they really didn't feel that they had anyone else in kind of like the professional arena outside of, say, occupational therapists and speech therapists and maybe ABA professionals, applied behavioral analysis professionals, that really seem to understand their kids. So like in daycares, in extracurricular programs, like things like swimming lessons or karate lessons, and even in the schools, they didn't feel like anyone was really understanding their kids, and they didn't feel that people really understood what autism was. And I kept hearing this over and over again. I kept hearing parents telling me that their kids were getting kicked out of daycare because the daycare staff just didn't know how to work with them, and they were having all kinds of problems in school and in class because, again, the teachers also didn't know how to work with them. And I started thinking, maybe they're not getting enough training in these different fields on autism. What if I took my now 16 years of experience and kind of helped, teach them in kind of a approachable, not overwhelming, but also informative kind of way about autism and about the experiences that these kids, teens, and young adults have, so that they understand not only what the individuals are going through, but how they can help them navigate when they have dysregulation, get overwhelmed, and things like that. And so that's what kind of led me to the business Spark Guidance as it is right now. And then the podcast idea kind of grew up as like a branch of that actual business.
What a great thing for you to turn around and go, hey, I have over a decade of all this varied experience. You must have just, you have been right there to see things transform from what autism, how it used to be viewed, which was very male focused, white male especially focused. All the research came from a very small pool to see where it's gone now.
Oh yeah, it has definitely expanded. I think it's going to be like the last post I'm going to put out probably tomorrow, kind of highlights that, but also kind of shows that while we are gathering more research now in the different minority communities, what I've noticed, unfortunately, is that from the time I started to now, we're still kind of complaining about the exact same things, where yes, on one hand, we've gotten a higher rate of minorities being diagnosed because they're becoming more aware, but they are still having just as much difficulty getting services as they did when I first started. That has not seemed to have changed at all. So it's interesting to see awareness has kind of come up quite a bit, but that's not reflecting in service implementation. So they're still not getting connected to what they need in order to be able for their kids and the families to thrive. So I like the fact that the research is actually showing this now, and that you can say, nope, we can look back and kind of prove like this is the continuing issue. This is what we need to address.
Are you seeing that across the board or only in a minority sector?
It's kind of across the board, but minority sectors always kind of get hit hardest.
Right.
And the Black community in particular seems to be the one getting hit the hardest. And so from what I've seen in the research, so that's another reason why I wanted to kind of focus in a little bit more, not saying that I don't, go to any community to train, but I definitely have a special interest in my community, the Black and, African American communities, because of the fact that they're getting awareness, but they're not they're still not getting connected to services. So even if it's not necessarily, building awareness for them, but also kind of hopefully inspiring a lot of folks to go into the field so that there's more of us in the field, and two, just more providers overall, so that we can start addressing these service deserts, as I like to call them.
Yeah, and I love your courses. Like, I want to take the Let's Talk Sensory course. So, and I think I told you I was just recently diagnosed my ADHD a long time ago. I actually took several of the tests for ADHD on my show with a psychiatrist who also took it with me.
Wow.
And that was interesting. He was like, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to come up higher on it. And I'm like, nope, you didn't. And guess what? I also have autism. I just texted him that about probably a week after I was diagnosed. And props to him. Okay, he's older. He's still a practicing psychiatrist, and he's older, and he's in his, close to his 80s. And he, the first thing he texted me back was, "Oh, you have so much empathy. There's no way that you can be autistic." And I wrote back and said, "I love you so much. And why don't we do a show where I talk about that? Because I want you to get some more education."
Yeah. Yeah. Because a lot of times, actually, a lot of autistic individuals have an overabundance of empathy,
That
which
would be
also
me.
causes problems. Yeah. So it's like, no, I'm not saying it's not the case for some, but to blanket all as saying, oh, they all have low empathy. No, that's not the case.
Yeah, I noticed there's so much NT, the neurotypical world, and the ND world, neurodivergent world, and that there can be kind of a warring faction between those two worlds. And I'm like, well, my understanding of this now is, no, we do everything and have all the experiences that a neurotypical person has. We just have them on a much more cellular and loud internally level, sometimes externally.
Right. They're not the same intensity, I guess you could say.
Exactly. Yeah. So I can have a highly, highly, highly empathic friend who's neurotypical, and I'm still going to feel things and see things that are, that go undetected in her world.
Right.
And I'm like, you didn't see those patterns of behavior between those two people? What are you looking at? What can't you see? I can see it so clearly. And not only that, I can feel it in my marrow. Thank you very much.
Yeah. It's really funny because I've been exploring the possibility of myself being on the spectrum, and it is really interesting, the pattern recognition. In some ways, I can recognize things really easily, but when it comes to things like telling if someone likes me or something like that, I have no clue.
Me either. Clueless Magoo. Yeah. Do you ever, I find it too, where I didn't get diagnosed until I was in my mid-50s. So I've had a whole lifetime of high masking and, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's interesting how I can be so mature, and I was an old soul as a kid, and I can see how easy it was to not detect me, also because just the information and education and awareness wasn't there when I was a kid. But I can also be quite the about things, just where people are like, wow, you're so accomplished, but then what's this?
Right. Your mind is like the old soul side, but then there's also this, which I usually keep pretty well masked. There's very much this very childlike like side of me, like who would loves to just go out into the ocean, and I would just sit there. And there have been times I've gone out there and just kind of twirled around in the water and just laughed, and then I stopped and I was like, wait a minute, people are gonna look at me and think that I'm off my rocker. Let me stop. But there's a bunch of little like of those, like I call it childlike wonder kind of things that I love, and I feel like I can't do them because it's like, oh, people aren't going to take me seriously if they see me skipping skipping around or something like
Right.
that.
I know it's a little scary to think about completely unmasking publicly. And honestly, it will take me a long time to kind of even figure out what that is, because it's been going on for so long.
Right,
It's like,
right.
how do I even know? But it's hard because you do get used to a lot of disappointment, a lot of reading things wrong,
Mhm.
taking things, I don't even want to say wrong, just taking things in a different way, and disappointments and friendship failures and maybe some romantic failures and things like that. I feel
Right.
like I've built up a thing to where I'm nervous about really sharing myself fully, because I've had so much rejection
Yeah.
that I'm just kind of
Yeah.
like, why bother? I'll just keep it in this little. So I share in safe groups, and every so often, like there's a wonderful, just listeners, so you know, there's so many great groups online. There's one on Reddit that's Autism Just for Women,
Mm.
and I get so much support there. It's amazing. But even there, I'm like, oh, should I delete that? Was that too much?
Right, right. Because you're not sure, even kind of saying like, hey, I suspect that I may be on the spectrum. I've seen not everyone, but I've seen a couple people, like their whole demeanor toward me change after
Yeah,
just saying that. And I'm like, I'm still the exact same person that I was
exactly.
3 minutes ago.
Exactly. Like what, it's very weird. The advocacy, the advocate part of me, and I know you'll understand this because that is exactly what you are. You're a total advocate. So
Hmm.
that part of me wants to be like, hey, yeah, this is the face of autism. This is
Right.
not the face, a face of autism. Like, that what that'll put my name out there, and I'll stand in front of it. And I did that about sexual abuse and all kinds of things. And I've had, experiences of, like this is it. But in this one, it was easier to get up and say, yeah, I was sexually abused than it kind of is for me to go, I'm autistic,
Right,
because of
right.
that
Because,
backlash that I'm like, "Oh,
yeah.
okay.
And there's so many still negative connotations associated with it. I know that looking back now, like say, I didn't have so much issue with it on the romantic side, but on as friendships go, I realized that I kept inviting in friends who I guess recognized it in me before I did and saw me as naive
Yes.
and would kind of infantize me. And I would get really upset when I recognized that that was what was happening. And then I would kind of start standing up for myself, and they would start feeling some kind of way because they're like, wait a minute, why are you suddenly,
Right.
being more assertive? And I'm like, you mean being the way I actually am, and you just didn't see it that way? And so I had a time period where quite a few friendships ended because of that, because I started becoming more assertive and didn't let people just kind of take over and basically kind of mommy me, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. Did you ever have people that you felt like came into your life and really wanting to be your friend, so they seem, and then I feel like sometimes they smell that there's something about you that is going to be really fun to take advantage of.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then wow, and then me going, what, how did this happen?
Yeah.
It's taken me so long to get it.
Yeah. It was almost like they were looking at me as not exactly as a friend, but as like a minion.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. Even
Yep.
even with I will stand up for you, the number of personality disordered, narcissistic people that I
Yeah.
have championed, because I bought the whole I'm a victim, it's not my fault. And it took me a while to see, oh, wait a minute, they're not the victim, they're the bully. And here I am
Yeah.
championing them quite naively, because I just immediately feel for their story. Oh boy, if I had to unring a lot of bells because of that.
Yeah. And so interesting how every time, like I said, like when I started kind of recognizing that and kind of not even like pushing back, just standing up for myself,
Yeah.
the whole friendship would go sour at that point, or quote unquote friendship, because
Right. I know what I call those. I just remove the P at the end of friendship and put a T there.
yeah,
That's when they go into that category at that point.
yep.
Oh, okay, that was that. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm happy that I have a handful. And it's interesting because the ones who have kind of been there for the longest time and the ones that kind of stuck with me and I've stuck with them, I'm pretty sure all of them are neurodivergent.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The ones that stick it out and stuff. Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure. Same with me. I'm like, oh yeah, I have really good friends, but they're all complete wackos in their own way, just like me, and
Exactly.
I love it.
Yes, exactly. And I love how we see things kind of like similarly, but like in slightly different ways, but the different ways complement each other, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of them, like my one friend Stella, I mean, her IQ is genius level. I mean, I've
Yeah.
given her an IQ test because she was like, yeah, I'm sure it's high. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We're gonna do one because I just want you to see.
Hmm.
And she had all these diagnoses. I'm borderline personality disorder. I'm bipolar. I'm this. And now she's like, you know what? I think I'm autistic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I think you are too.
Yeah, and that's the even sadder facts. The fact that especially women get diagnosed with everything under the sun before autism. Like I've gotten depression, moderate depression, and I've gotten generalized anxiety disorder, but I'm just starting to realize, oh, my anxiety was because of sensory overload.
Yes.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? I stopped taking my antidepressants, and I'm please, listeners, do not take this as a I'm against them or that because it is such a thing with people with taking their depression medication. When you need it,
Mhm.
freaking take it.
Right.
I only stopped taking it because it's it never really fully helped me. It
Yeah.
actually made a lot of things worse because I was being treated for things that weren't actually what was going on.
Yep. That happened to when I was doing just straight like mental health therapy. I had a she was actually just turned like 18, so she was just an adult, and she came in and she had been passed from like therapist to therapist, and she had this like just huge list of she had been diagnosed with everything under the sun and had been put on every medication known to man since she was like, 9 or 10 years old. She had been in and out of
Mm.
institutions, and after a few months, I remembered her talking in particular about her job and how it was just too much for her. And I started listening because I was noticing little things that she was saying. And I was like, this sounds like sensory overload. And she was like, what? I was like, that's what this sounds like. Like everything you're describing sounds like sensory overload. And then I finally just asked the question, has anyone ever brought up, the possibility of autism to you? And she paused and she was like, now that you mention it, there was one psychiatrist back when I was 16 who brought it up, but I kind of dismissed it because I didn't think it was that, because I didn't think, oh, that can't explain all of my, everything going on with me. She said, but you know what? Now I'm starting to think back. So even though technically as a mental health therapist, at least in my state for sure, I can't actively like treat autism itself. It has to be autism in a secondary diagnosis of like depression or anxiety or something like that.
Mm.
But yeah, that's one reason why I didn't go for my licensure as a mental health counselor, because I was like, I won't be able to do what I actually want to do. So but I decided to I said, well, let's treat your anxiety, quote unquote, by using techniques that help to regulate her system. And it was like night and day. She did a complete 180. And she was just like, this is all I had to do, just regulate myself. And I was like, yeah. She's like, what in the world?
I know, isn't it amazing? That's what's
Yeah.
so great about doing what we do, because when you see somebody else's life
Mhm.
change, and even if, you suffered hugely and did not have this experience until way later than whoever you're helping, it doesn't matter. You're still like,
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And she'd been working in a restaurant as a waitress, which I can imagine that's overwhelming.
oh my God, what a
Yeah.
horrible job for someone on, well, not maybe not
Yes.
everybody, of course, but Yeah, for a lot of
A
people.
lot of people, yes. And she ended up, before I kind of left that position and she kind of discharged out because she was better at that point, she got a job as a yoga instructor for the elderly at a
Oh,
center. And
oh my,
she was like, I absolutely adore this. This is like the best thing ever.
right.
And I was like, oh, I'm just happy that, and even though she wasn't supposed to, she texted me like a few months later and was like, I want to let you know that she was a budding artist. She goes, I finally like put my work out there to be bought. And I know I'm not supposed to like communicate with you afterwards, but I just want to let you know that I'm doing okay and that I took this step. And I was like, oh, that's awesome.
That's so great.
Yeah.
One thing I am, and I'm making an assumption, you can tell me if I'm
Hmm.
wrong, but I see, it's your own business, you're doing your own thing.
Hmm.
I know for me, not knowing what was going on with me, I thrived when I was a consultant.
Yes.
I could go in, see every issue going on in a company, especially personnel issues, no degree at all whatsoever. I was there to help them with database management and office function and company workflow, that kind of thing. But I could go in and I would just immediately see, oh, we need to do this, do this, do this, and then I'll set up your database the way you need to. And then by the time I was just starting to feel overwhelmed because I was around regular people too much, and
Mm.
I could then dip out because the consulting job is done. That worked very, very well for me. So what do you think about that?
So it's really funny that you mentioned that because that aspect of going in and identifying the issues within. I worked in mostly nonprofits, but going in and identifying all the issues within the nonprofit, that got me into so much trouble in almost every job I had because because I wasn't a consultant at that time, I was an employee. But I
Oh,
would go in, I would go in, and within the first 90 days, it'd be like, okay, well, we've evaluated your progress. I'm like, yeah, well, I evaluated you guys, and I think you would benefit by doing this, that, and they'd be like, what? What?
yeah. Same here. Oh, yeah. I've gotten in serious. I was just telling someone when I was a little kid, I remember it distinctly. I was being driven home from school, and I think I was probably 6. I was in Montessori school. Great decision on my mom's part. Public school is where I went to die, basically.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
awful, but Montessori school was great. But she was driving me home, and all of my little friends in the neighborhood that I really never played with because my school was far away. But as I'm driving home, they're all standing in front of my house like they were eagerly waiting for me to come home.
Mhm.
And I was so excited because I didn't really have friends. I knew every dog in the neighborhood,
Mhm.
but I had no, human friends really.
Mhm.
And when I ran over to them, so excited, they all turned their back and ran away from me. It was all done on purpose.
Wow.
And that has happened in different ways again and again and again. And my mom said, well, honey, you're kind of bossy.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. So I learned how to tone it down. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't care. This is wrong. And I'm going to say it's wrong. And that's just the way that it is. And then I had to, file the edges off of that too. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I remember in middle school, it's funny because that classmate is now a Facebook friend of mine, but like I remember a classmate in particular, just like I could sense that something was off about her and her whole little group because usually I would hang out with them during lunch and everything, and I noticed they were acting very kind of standoffish, and I kind of tapped her before our next class. I was like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And she just looked at me and said, "Why are you so full of yourself?" And then she just walked off, and I was like, "What?"
yeah. Oh, I have had that same thing happen. Oh my God.
I was like, what are you talking about? Like,
I'm the most insecure, riddled with panic person you've ever met. Are you kidding?
yeah. And you start going back in your head, like, was I talking too much during lunch? Did I do something that offended them? Like, what happened? Like, I was completely flabbergasted to the point that I remember in that class, I started crying because I really couldn't figure out like what I had done. And then I was still crying when the class ended. And then my little, I guess you could say boyfriend, found out that I was crying and he wanted to find out who had made me cry and beat them up. And I'm like, no, let's not do that. Just go that route. But yeah, so a lot of this is interesting because I'm finding out that a lot of these experiences that I thought were just weird to me, it's like, no, these are things that actually these are just common with the neurodivergent group, apparently.
That's what I
Wow.
love about all these groups and stuff, because, or
Yeah.
even the Reddit threads, it's all anonymous and you can just, people post things like that. And then you're like, oh yeah, that happened to me too. Oh my God, blah, blah, blah. It's so validating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
validating. And just the number, I mean, the way that things present with me, I definitely went to the, seek justice,
Yeah.
realm. And so there were just so many times where I would just think, well, I'm going to just be very forthright. And wouldn't even occur to me not to say something and tell someone, hey, I don't think, it's like there was a girl I hung out with in high school, and I was always trying to find somebody so that I wasn't alone at lunch.
Mhm.
It never occurred to me that I could just go in the freaking library, which is where I would have loved to be
Yeah.
anyway, since I love to read, but for whatever reason, that thought never came into my head. But so I would just find these different people, and I didn't really like any of them, and I don't think they really liked me. Um, I didn't really meet great, 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 great friends until my 40s.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would, some girl would be making racist remarks or whatever, and my cousins were all Vietnamese.
Mm.
And that was a big deal at our school, was to make fun of all the Vietnamese kids. And I would, I thought, well, I'm just going to sit down with her and I'm going to tell her, do you, I mean, how would you like that if somebody made fun of you and you just say these things and they're just sitting right there, that it hurts their feelings and they're crying, and why do you act like that? I thought, oh, what a great service I'm providing to this person to help them grow.
Mm.
It did
And
not end well.
yeah, it did not go out. Yeah. Different experiences, but kind of the same common result where it's like, okay, I was trying to be helpful and that completely blew up in my face. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna go back into my little shell now. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I'm gonna hide and sleep in my car at lunch. How's that?
Because like, wow. Yeah. I kind of floated between different groups,
Me
and
too.
yeah, but I never really felt fully part of any of them.
Yeah,
It
same
was
here.
it was literally kind of just like, so I was known by a lot of people, but it was very surface level, like extremely surface level.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating. And I dealt with being attractive in a way that I guess whatever. I in a way that is enough to make it uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
And then with issues around predatory male behavior and all, it was just a big soup of awfulness. So I found it much easier to like play down anything that would remotely make me stand out.
Right.
You
I
know,
would always have the thing, especially when it came to dating. It's like I could reel in enough for like the first date, but it hardly ever would go past the first
yeah,
date. And I was like, did I do something again? What, it got to the point where it was like I did something, didn't I? Sometimes it was just the guy was a jerk, but other times it was like, what? Everything seemed to go so well. Why did you just stop talking to me and ghost me? I thought we had a great time, kind of thing. But I'm realizing now, looking back, it's like, you know what, there's probably little things, like I was probably really blunt about certain things that I shouldn't have been. And I also have a tendency to want to get into really deep, intense conversations on the
Yep.
first date that I probably shouldn't, because I want to know about the person, but I don't want to do like the little small talk thing. I want to get into like, so what are your thoughts on spirituality and stuff like that? I want to get to know like you as a person. And it's like,
Yeah,
no,
show me how
that's
interesting you are inside.
exactly. You can be good looking on the outside, but if you have nothing on the inside, it's not going to be appealing to me. It's just not.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. Yeah. See, we're twins.
Yeah.
Twins in that world. Yes, same way. Thank goodness for adulthood, because
Yeah.
then you start to find your people, and then you're like, okay,
Yeah.
and then you find this out. What I have found is, this is just, for anybody listening, if you're on the fence about it, you can get an assessment. If you need an official diagnosis, I did that whole official diagnosis thing, but you can also there's lots of tests
Yes.
online, and that's okay too. You don't have to have like an official diagnosis.
Yeah.
If you feel like this resonates with you, I will say that my getting diagnosed has been so good for me. It's presented itself with a lot of challenges, but from the moment I learned about it, my already great connections with my neurodivergent soulmate friends have become richer and deeper and more amazing. And than anybody new that I meet,
Mhm.
I have richer and deeper and better connection with. So there's something to be said for really knowing who you are, emotionally, spiritually, physiologically.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, like I'm on the side where I don't know if I'm going to go for like an official diagnosis, but I've taken almost every assessment known to man, including the RADS, which they've now come out and said there's research now stating that that is actually a really good indicator. It doesn't diagnose autism, but it's a really good indicator of whether or not you may be, and maybe autistic, and kind of giving the correct probability of it. And I know I took that, and I think the score goes that if you're 60 or higher, the
Right.
higher your number is at that point, the higher the probability is that you are autistic. And I'll say I took that and I got a 140. So
Right. So, I know. I was like, there's no doubt. There's no on the fence. There's no like the Myers-Briggs where
yeah,
I'm like, am I an extrovert or am I an introvert? I'm kind of in the middle.
right.
No, there is no middle. You are autistic.
Right, right. And I saw that. I was like, oh, like I knew I was going to be over 60. I just didn't know I was going to be that far over
Right.
60. And I was like, oh, I'm like autistic, according to this. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. There's no like, I didn't dip my pinky toe in just my pinky toe. Now
Right.
I'm autistic.
No,
No, my whole
no.
body is.
You're all in the deep end of the pool. You're straight in.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
I think it's good for folks. And I know it's difficult to get a clinical diagnosis. Also, depending on what area of the country you're in, it can be, almost impossible. And there's wait lists and everything. And I always tell people, like, you know what, self-diagnosis is also valid. Go and do your research, look up the different, assessments, take them. And like you said, find the communities and just kind of go in there and kind of, listen to the different stories. If you start hearing like familiar stories like we're having right here, it's like, hey, you know what? This is sounding a lot like my experiences, then you may be onto something.
Yeah. And listen, any of you that are on the fence or that or even if you know that you're not autistic, but you do get overwhelmed sensory wise, I've been,
Mhm.
looking at your class, which I am going to take and sign up for the sensory online class. Cause I'm like, oh, there are things I need to know about this. So anyone that's dealing with anxiety, just feeling overwhelmed, like if the idea of going to a mall sends you into panic or going to Walmart sends you into a panic,
Right.
this is the kind of class that's good for you, regardless of being on any kind of a spectrum, because, sensory overwhelm is for real for everybody, not just, people, neurodivergent people.
Right. And I kind of set up the online course to be really quick. Like you can just, if you like go in there and you just, want to listen to the different ones, you can just sit there and just listen through, the entire thing. It's under an hour, I guarantee. And I really wanted to get to like the basics. So a lot of times people don't realize how much that sensory system plays into behavior and plays into your experiences. Like it sometimes just sits in the background. We just don't think about it, but it really is, like, especially when it comes to autism, that's to me like 60 to 70% of the condition is the
Yes.
sensory side. If you can figure out the sensory aspect, then you've figured out a vast majority of the behaviors that are so quote unquote concerning to neurotypicals. You figured it out.
Right, right. And when you're overwrought, like I
Yeah.
know I already overthink every freaking thing on the planet. I've had many healers and, people in counseling and so on say to me, you at rest is like an Olympiad
Yeah.
doing the Olympic Games. We've got to figure out how to just like get you to stop thinking. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And I don't drink or anything anymore. I definitely used alcohol as a crutch for a long time, and I don't anymore. And how amazing is that? I don't
Yeah.
anymore because I don't need to, because I've learned how to take care of I learned how to do naturally what the alcohol was doing for me.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, you probably noticed like not having alcohol. Like mine, I had to cut down on my caffeine because I noticed I didn't realize how sensitive I am to caffeine, like ridiculously so. And cutting that down has greatly like kind of like improved like on just how I handle things. If I have like say a medium coffee as opposed to a small one, the medium one, I'm going to be jittery, and things that normally wouldn't push me over the edge will always push me over the edge. And I'll have like, I call them like mini meltdowns where they're not full blown, but it's kind of like, you know, my family looks, they're like, okay, she's having a moment. Let's just step back. Don't give her anything else. Don't give her any more demands. Just let her sit over there for a second and just de-escalate herself. Because it, you know, and again, I didn't realize for a long time that that's a strong indicator of autism when you're having like those little like, you know, meltdowns like that.
Let's
I
talk
didn't.
about that because
Sure.
when you say meltdown,
Mm-hmm.
I know what that means, and it
Mm-hmm.
is a meltdown for
Yeah.
sure, right? Just,
Sure.
but I want to get more into examples of what that can look like, because when I've
Right.
said that to someone that either is in the dark about their own autism or they're actually, you know, neurotypical or neurodivergent and not autistic, they think of a meltdown as that, oh, when I say I had a meltdown, they're like, oh my God, really? You were walking around ripping chunks of hair out of your scalp and screaming at the moon? You do that? And they get
Yeah.
scared. And I'm like, no, that is
Yeah.
not, no. So can we talk a little bit about, you know, with all your experience, what actual examples of what meltdowns are?
Right. So, especially when it comes to adults who have gotten really good at masking
Yeah,
meltdowns, well, more specifically, we have both meltdowns and shutdowns. So we do both. Younger kids tend to have the very stereotypical, you know, meltdowns of like, you know, on the floor screaming, that, you know, what you were talking about.
right.
Most adults who are really good at masking it are not going to have those kind of meltdowns, or they'll have very minor versions of them. For example, one example that I give when I do the sensory training in person is I kind of explain how, for example, I'm getting ready to go out for the day. I have my entire When I go out, I have my entire schedule figured out. I know exactly every place I'm going to hit. I know the order in which I'm going to hit those things. And I know about, you know, ballpark of what time I'm going to get back to my house. I have it planned out that well. The worst thing someone can do to me is as I'm walking out the door, say, hey, since you're going to be out, can you go do such and such?
Oh,
Now, to most typical people, they might just be like, fine, whatever. But to me, it's like my brain goes into like just overload on that. Cause now it's like, wait, they're asking me to go to this place. That's completely out of order from where I was going to go before. Oh my gosh, is that even on the loop I was taking? No, that's not on the loop. That's way out in the other direction. That means I have to completely redo the loop. And now I'm just going to get off schedule. And now I'm not going to get to my last stop in time. And then I'm just like, I start twitching and I kind of sit there for a moment because it's like, calm down, it's fine, it's fine, it's going to be fine. And that's a minor version. That's a very minor version of just like whole brain just starts going into overload. And
yeah,
it's
it's like
like,
watching that movie with Schwarzenegger where that mask is melting off of his face. It's like,
yeah. Yeah. It's like you're literally kind of like just, okay, brains just can't take this right now. If you are already, that's me when I'm like calm and together, that's my reaction.
Right.
If I'm already at like a 8 or a 9 as far as tense level, like the day has already been going terribly, and then I get hit with that, that's when I start snapping at people.
Right.
And I don't mean to, but that's when I start snapping at people. That's when I start just kind of saying things. I also notice I start making like sounds.
Right.
I didn't realize that, but I start making sounds. I might start pacing a bit. I notice sometimes I'll start flexing my fingers a bit because I'm just getting like, okay, you know, kind of feeling. And so my family in particular have kind of learned, you know what, if we need her to get something while she's out, we need to tell her like either first thing in the morning before she's planned out her day or the day before. And that way, you know, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, I have no problem, you know, with doing it. It's just do not ask me as I'm walking out the door. That to me is like a prime example of that kind of sudden change in schedule and routine completely throwing off. The other thing that a lot of adults tend to go through is a shutdown. And that's when it literally is what it sounds like. You literally just shut down. You are incapable of doing anything. That's a lot of people I think would confuse that with depression, like an episode of
Right.
depression. And you
I
just
have confused that with depression. Yes.
yeah. And it's because it's just gotten to be too much, and you just need to be somewhere where you are comfortable, where it is safe, and there is very little sensory stimulation and people bothering you. And so a lot of people, that is our house, our bedroom, our bed,
Right.
so,
I take to the
so
bed with my hand on my
exactly.
forehead. I don't care if I look like I'm being over dramatic. You don't want to know what will happen if you don't let me go into that bedroom.
Exactly, exactly. And there's been a few instances where I've seen what happens when I'm not going to go into detail about the particular incident I'm thinking about, but there was one where I wanted to leave, and because there were things going on, I couldn't leave the place at that moment. And I went back into I was actually in the house and I couldn't leave, and I wanted to leave. And I went back into my bedroom and I sat down on the bed and I started rocking back and forth, and I just kept repeating, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go, I gotta go. And for some that had happened to me before, but for some reason, even with all my years of working in autism, I had never sat there and connected, hey, you know that echolalia thing that you see your kids doing? That's what you're doing right there. It never dawned on me until like I actually stopped. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That was literally echolalia.
Yeah, think about this. I was flying to be the keynote speaker at a conference. My staff was already across the country at said conference, waiting for me with all of the stuff for our booth, for my setup to do my show, for me to do the speaking. Like I had all of the necessary things for them to be able to, do what they need to do. It's just how the flights worked. I get there, the flight keeps getting canceled. I have to speak at 9 a.m. in front of, 3,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all these people in my life that were just, here, oh, Kristin has the money. Let's just be her friend so we can get every bit of that. And, I just was clueless Magoo about so many things. And I ended up in the airport. All the flights were canceled. It was just, just had to be the way it was. My staff is screaming, we can't get into our hotel if you're not going to get here. We're going to be sleeping on the street. It was just awful in every way. And the airport people were so nice. They actually called the mental health aides at the airport who came and sat with me while I blubbered. Like I've never done something like that since I was a small child.
Right.
And waited for my mommy to come and pick me up. And I was like in my 40s.
Yeah. Because it was a lot. It was all these different people all hitting. And then the airport in and of itself was just, oh my gosh. Just,
if I never plane again, that will be a happy thing for me. Yeah. Well, I mean, we could obviously talk forever. We could be friends. We have a lot of
similar experiences for sure.
But I'm so happy that you're on the network. I'm so happy that you're doing what you do because you have a very calm, reassuring voice. You'd be somebody that I would want to take classes and things like that from, because I'd be like, this person knows what she's talking about. So listeners, I want you to hear Angel will tell us where you can find out more about her, and please sign up. Like I said, even if you're not, even a hint of suspicious about being on the spectrum, there are things here that are good to know. So Angel, please tell everyone where they can find out more about you.
Sure. You can go, pretty much the hub for everything is my website, which is www.sparc guidance.com. So sparkguidance.com. That's kind of my main spot. You can connect to my social media from there. My LinkedIn, find me. My Instagram is the same at Spark Guidance. And on the website, you also get connected to the go into register for the Let's Talk Sensory course. And I'm going to give like a heads up now. By the time this comes out, it'll probably already be live. It's not live just yet, but I'm going to do a live online Let's Talk Autism course. I've already kind of set it up. Yeah, that's going to be on June 8th on like I think it's going to start at 10 a.m. June 8th on Zoom. And so I'm in the final stages of prepping that and getting the whole like Eventbrite thing prepared and everything. So that'll probably launch open for registration on May 1st is what I'm aiming for. And if it does well, I'll probably make it kind of a regular, reoccurring thing. So if you can't make June 8th, I'll probably do it again. And it's kind of like it's similar in structure to like Let's Talk Sensory, but it's just kind of going over like an overview of autism and also a chance to come in and just kind of talk about, your experiences, or if you have questions about it, or like, hey, I have this little scenario, can you help me out with it? Anyone, be if you're autistic yourself, if you are a provider or a parent or a caregiver, I'm trying to make these where anyone can kind of get something from them. So again, once that launches, it will also be on my website, and the Let's Talk Sensory course is already available there, and the podcast will be linking through that website as well.
Oh, I'm so excited. Everybody look up Spark Out. Such a fantastic podcast. Definitely check it out. And again, Angel, thank you. You're an angel. I'm sure
Thank
that's
you.
the 1,000th time you've heard that, but
Yep.
all right, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you on the next show.
But will you ride the low, low, lows with me? Will you ride the low, low, lows with me?
One thing you can always count on at Mental Health News Radio Network and my show is that there will always be dogs around. Why? They are natural healers, excellent for your mental health. The original therapy dog Miles has something to say in just a moment. For now, please check out all of our amazing shows at mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com and all your favorite podcast apps. Until next time, I'm Kristin Sananta Walker, and thank you for listening.
Me tonight, and I can ride the low, low, lows with me. I can ride the low.